The European Union, as we've been saying, has come out in strong support of Palestine after Trump's Jerusalem decision, but divisions within the bloc could hurt European leaders who have pledged to back Palestine's claim.
Trump's Jerusalem decision has united an otherwise divided European Union. All of the current members, including the United Kingdom, who wants to leave the Union, have backed the two-state solution.
The European Union has a clear and united position. We believe that only a realistic solution to the conflict between Israel and Palestine is based on two states, and with Jerusalem as the capital of both the State of Israel and the State of Palestine.
The European Union has a deep interest in both Israel and Palestine. The EU is a member of the West Asia Quartet, along with the United States, the United Nations and Russia. It's also the biggest aid donor to Palestinians and Israel's top trade partner. European leaders were quick to criticize the US president after his Jerusalem announcement. The British Prime Minister Theresa May said that Trump's decision was unhelpful. Meanwhile, the French President Emmanuel Macron called it regrettable. But Trump's Jerusalem decision will test the unity of the European Union. Divisions within the bloc have reduced its influence. Germany has extended support to Israel's stand on multiple occasions, but back in 2014, Sweden announced its recognition to the state of Palestine. Despite their differences, the EU has pledged to push for Palestine. The foreign ministers of the bloc are expected to hold talks with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Brussels on Monday. Bureau Report, WION.
The world has not taken US President Trump's decision to shift the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, the contested holy city, very well. The United Nations Security Council is meeting to discuss the matter and understand if there is a need to take any action. 8 out of the 15 members have requested this meeting. France and the UK are the only 2 permanent members which agreed on calling the meeting. 6 other non-permanent members, Bolivia, Italy, Senegal, Sweden, Britain and Hungary, joined the call. The Arab world too has called for an emergency meeting of the Arab League that happens tomorrow, an institution where 22 foreign ministers from majority Muslim countries discuss common challenges and problems. Palestine and Jordan requested this meeting, and this was immediately endorsed by Morocco. The League will meet on Saturday to plan out a common reaction to the embassy move. In earlier statements, the Arab League had said that the recognition by any state of Jerusalem as Israel's capital city or the establishment of any diplomatic mission would have been seen as, and I quote, a blatant attack on the Arab nation and Palestinian rights and a serious violation of international law. Turkey, which currently chairs the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, has called for an emergency meeting of the OIC next week. The Turkish president has been among the most vocal critics of Donald Trump's decision. Shortly after Trump's speech, he said that any change in Jerusalem is a red line for all Muslims. The OIC will meet in Istanbul at a time when relations between Turkey and the US are at their lowest. Turkey accuses America of supporting the Syrian Democratic Forces, a group Ankara labels as terrorists. And these are live images we are bringing you from the United Nations Security Council meeting.
I invite the representatives of Israel and Jordan to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. I propose that the Council invite the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine to the United Nations to participate in the meeting in accordance with the provisional rules of procedure and the previous practice in this regard. There being no objection, it is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite Mr. Nikolai Mladenov, Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process and personal representative of the Secretary General, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. Mr. Mladenov is joining today's meeting via video teleconference from Jerusalem. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I now give the floor to Mr. Nikolai Mladenov.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, members of the Security Council, Jerusalem is one of the most complex and perhaps captivating cities in the world. Of all the final status issues in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, as identified in the Oslo Accords, refugees, settlements, security arrangements, borders, relations and cooperation with neighbors, and other issues of common interest, Jerusalem is the most emotionally charged and difficult subject. For the Jewish people, it is, and it will always be, the center of their faith and life. For centuries, they have looked to it as a symbol of hope for the future. It is also the center of life for Palestinians, and since the occupation of East Jerusalem in 1967, many have lived in fear of losing their livelihoods and their connection to the city. For both Israelis and Palestinians, Jerusalem is and will always remain an integral part of their national identity. For billions of people around the world, it also serves as a symbol and as a cornerstone of their Christian, Jewish or Muslim faith. That is why it remains one of the most sensitive places in the world. For decades, there has been a broad agreement among UN member states about the particular status of Jerusalem, including through Security Council resolutions 252 from 1968, 476 from 1980, and 478 from 1980 as well as General Assembly Resolution 181. The United Nations has repeatedly declared that any unilateral decision that seeks to alter the character and status of Jerusalem could seriously undermine current peace efforts and may have repercussions across the region. As stated by the Secretary General, the United Nations position is clear. Jerusalem is a final status issue for which a comprehensive, just and lasting solution must be achieved through negotiations between the parties and on the basis of the relevant UN resolutions and mutual agreements. Mr. President, on December 6th, US President Donald Trump announced that the United States recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of the State of Israel. In this recognition, he said that final status issues, including the boundaries of Israeli sovereignty, remain for the parties to determine. He made clear his commitment to advance peace between Israelis and Palestinians and called for the status quo in the holy places to be respected. The announcement also signaled the start of preparations to move the US Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, while renewing a 6-month waiver for which the embassy remains in Tel Aviv. Without doubt, this decision has been widely welcomed in Israel. It has also caused anxiety across the Middle East and beyond. Palestinian President Abbas condemned the move and stressed that the United States has withdrawn from its role as a mediator in the process. He warned of the potential consequences for security and stability in the region and underlined the need for immediate work towards national reconciliation. Hamas described the proclamation of an attack as an attack against the Palestinian people and called on the PLO to withdraw its recognition of Israel. In Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu thanked President Trump for the decision. He reaffirmed his commitment to maintaining the status quo at the holy sites, while President Rivlin said that Jerusalem is not an obstacle to peace. Mr. President, I'm particularly concerned about the potential risk of violent escalation. In anticipation of the US decision, Palestinian factions called for 3 days of rage to take place from 6th to 8th of December. Some called for December 8th to be the start of a new uprising or intifada. Since the decision, we have seen widespread demonstrations and violent clashes between Palestinian protesters and Israeli security forces throughout the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem and Gaza. According to OCHA, at least 1 Palestinian was killed and more than 140 have been injured. There have also been protests in Arab cities and villages within Israel, as well as cities around the region and beyond, from Lebanon and Jordan to Malaysia and Bangladesh. On December 7th, 6 rockets were reportedly fired from Gaza towards Israel. All but 1 landed short without causing damage or injury. The Israeli Defense Forces responded by shelling a Hamas military installation in the Strip and bombing another one from the air, causing damage but no injuries. Mr. President, we continue to follow developments on the ground very closely. We all understand and respect the symbolic, religious, and emotional charge that Jerusalem holds for people across the region and beyond. Nevertheless, I urge all political, religious, and community leaders to refrain from provocative action and rhetoric that can lead to escalation. And I call on all to exercise restraint and engage in dialogue. It is now more important than ever that we preserve the prospects for peace. It will be ordinary Israelis and Palestinians, their families, their children, who will ultimately have to live with the human costs and the suffering caused by further violence. It is they who will look to their leaders to find the strength and the will to achieve a just, a comprehensive peace that addresses all final status issues, that ends the occupation of Palestinian territory that started in 1967, and then brings security and stability to both Israelis and Palestinians. Mr. President, the United Nations remains strongly committed to supporting all efforts towards a negotiated two-state solution. This is the only way to achieve the legitimate national aspirations of both Israelis and Palestinians. This point has been clearly reaffirmed by Secretary General Guterres, and I stress again his word. There is no plan B for the two-state solution. Palestinian and Israeli leaders, but also the international community, have an important responsibility to advance peace efforts to this end. Only through constructive dialogue can we hope to achieve peace, and I call on all parties to remain engaged. Mr. President, today we stand at another critical moment in the long-running history of this conflict, where we are yet to see if the prospects of peace can be preserved and advanced. It is up to all of us in the international community, just as much it is up to Israeli and Palestinian leaders, to urgently advance a just and lasting resolution of this conflict. The Secretary General has been clear that realizing a two-state solution with Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and Palestine is the only way that such a vision can be achieved. I have warned many times in the past, Mr. President, and I will do so again today. If the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not resolved in line with relevant UN resolutions and in a manner that meets the legitimate national aspirations of both peoples, it risks being engulfed into the vortex of religious radicalism that has taken over the Middle East. There is a serious risk today that we may see a chain of unilateral actions which can only push us further away from achieving our shared goal of peace. It will be critical in the coming days that leaders demonstrate their wisdom and make all efforts to reduce the rhetoric, prevent incitement, and rein in radical elements. In its report in 2016, the Middle East Quartet called for steps to reverse negative trends that undermine the two-state solution, so as to build the conditions necessary for successful final status negotiations.